And moving on to our fifth topic, James Gunn was also asked on Twitter on if his films in the DCU under DC Studios will ever suffer from studio interference. Films that are infamously known for studio interference in the DCEU is a perfect example of how it can be devastating to a story and film production, as well as the overall quality of the film. Films like Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, and the theatrical cut of Justice League are prime examples. Marvel Studios, on the other hand, interferes with their movies all the time, and phases 1, 2, and 3 are perfect examples of how studio interference in the right setting can be a major success. Gunn has now stated that his films won't suffer from studio interference because his role is much different than Zack Snyder's, because him and Safran would be the studio heads interfering like Feige used to be. I myself love these comments for multiple reasons, despite Gunn killing my dreams of seeing Cavill's Superman again. I do think that the setup for DC Studios and the setup for the DCU, where you have these figureheads in charge, this one vision, you got it planned out from the start, something that the Star Wars sequel trilogy should have had with Kathleen Kennedy, and I think we could all agree on that.
Right, yes.
And you could make the argument that the DCEU should have also had that, because when Man of Steel...
Of course, everyone's been asking for that for years.
Right, for years and years and years. Man of Steel, which is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time, maybe my favorite. I think, it's known. It was not made originally intended to set up a shared universe. It was a film that was kind of sprungboard off of The Dark Knight Rises when that film was being worked on and was under production. So that universe was never truly set up for success, even though it launched with a great film, in my opinion. It was never, Batman didn't show up in the post-credit scene. You didn't have that Nick Fury connective tissue.
Right.
Iron Man did feel very independent, which is why I love it so much. It's a Marvel movie that you don't have crossovers every 5 seconds and references to other things and future projects. That's why it still holds up so good. But you do still have that connective tissue by the end of the film, and in The Incredible Hulk and Thor, Captain America the First Avenger, and then of course it leads up beautifully to The Avengers. Of course, you got Iron Man 2 in there, sorry, I forgot. But DCU is never set up that way. The DCU is going to be DC Studios, its own film studio. It has nobody to answer to. There's no Walter Hamada. There's no Kevin Tsujihara.
It's just
David Zaslav, James Gunn, Peter Safran. That's it. And James Gunn, Peter Safran, seems like they're going to get most control. Of course, they're going to still have to answer to their big boss. But there's nobody else that's going to come in and tell James Gunn, Peter Safran, or directors working under them and say, hey, you got to take out this and this, take out 30 minutes of the movie, throw in Doomsday. Could you introduce the Justice League in this movie? Because we want to change Man of Steel 3 to actually Justice League, Man of Steel 2 to Batman vs. Superman. Oh, Suicide Squad? We want to have a movie trailer company come in and re-edit the movie because
it's too dark.
Batman vs. Superman was too dark, and this movie's too dark. And Justice League, we kind of did do the same thing. Bye, Zach. Hey, Joss, can you come over from Marvel? And here we are today. None of that baggage is going to happen, at least not from studio interference. I think it's a great thing that DC fans are going to have a studio dedicated, a film studio dedicated to movies just for us. There's no competition. There's no other competing budgets within that one studio. Of course, it's still all under Warner Brothers. But one studio dedicated to nothing but Batman, Flash, Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Green Lantern, Zatanna, whoever. Isn't that what we've all been kind of wanting? Especially if you're a DC fan and you're looking at the MCU, and maybe the MCU hasn't been your cup of tea, and you're just thinking, man, it would be great if we had 3 or 4 Justice League movies. Or maybe if we had a Flash trilogy by now. Hell, we've got 3 Guardians and a Holidays special. We've got 3 Ant-Man movies. Can't get 1 Flash. That's how I feel. But moving forward, I'm pretty optimistic that we could get a Flash trilogy. We could get a Justice League trilogy or whatever, because it's being set up for success. Even though it's not going to have my favorite Superman in it. So will it live up to the hype? Will it live up to what has came before? I don't know. But it's definitely being set up that way. What do you think?
So I do have some concerns. I do like the idea of it being set up and having little to no studio interference. I do think some, like in the case of Kevin Feige saying, let's go, my story's going this direction, let's go this direction. Like, I think that's fine for studio interference as long as, directors, writers, everyone who's going into the movie knows what the vision is first, instead of being like, oh, no, we're changing everything you're doing last minute. Like, that I'm done with, definitely. My big worry is James Gunn is taking a lot of pages from Kevin Feige's book, right? He's obviously learned a lot, and he's going to apply what he's learned. What I'm scared of is I am one of those DC fans who likes Marvel, but not necessarily MCU. A big thing that Derek hears from me is the MCU flavor. I don't like it. It's sometimes like it bleeds into everything, and I like things when they feel connected but feel individual. And for me, the MCU doesn't quite have that. Not all the time. There are some movies that are exceptions. I'm worried that the DCU is going to go that exact same direction, and it's all going to feel either Marvelized or it's going to have its own DCU flavor, and all of it's going to be like that. And I hope that it's not all like Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, because I do like those projects, but Superman is not that. Batman is not that. Wonder Woman is not that. None of those characters are that. So I just hope that James Gunn has the respect for the characters that Kevin Feige obviously does for Marvel, but enough respect for the characters in the DC universe that, don't take it all in one direction. At least still have the films have their own individuality, and everything can have connective tissue without it all being the same. It doesn't all have to feel like the exact same thing over and over and over and over and over. And that's what I've heard. Like, I've had family members and friends that have told me, like, I gave up on the MCU because it just all is the same thing over and over and over and over again, which I can agree to a point. But there is definitely unique things in each film and in the MCU that people like, obviously. I'm in the minority here saying that, MCU isn't necessarily always for me. But I do like certain movies. Like, I love the Russo brothers movies in that universe. So I hope that, he takes all the right pages from Kevin Feige and leaves behind some of the stuff that I think is not needed in DC. We don't need to have all of them feel, like you could have Skybeam here, Skybeam there, Skybeam there, and it all, feels very much
the same
sameness.
tone.
Yes, I'd like exactly. Differences in tone in each movie is important because not every character has the same tone. Because the Flash, he's very lighthearted. He's very spunky. He's very funny, especially when it's Wally West. He's very jokey. And, even Barry Allen, they're kind of writing him very similar, but that's a whole nother conversation. But Wonder Woman is not like that. She does have some humor.
Sure.
But her humor is a little more dry because she's lived on an island with ladies the entire time. She doesn't always understand everyone's references. And, with Superman, yes, he's funny, but it's kind of dad humor. And then there's Batman where, like, especially if you look at Kevin Conroy's, he just roasts people. And then
Yeah.
he's very dark most of the time. So I think if you change a lot of the way these characters feel so they all have the same flavor, it'll end up feeling like how I felt with, like, Joss Whedon's Justice League, where I was like, oh, that's not Batman. That's Iron Man with Batman's face. Oh, that's not Aquaman. That's Thor with Aquaman's face. Like, that's how that movie felt to me. So I'm just hoping we don't go that direction. And I know that was Joss Whedon, that wasn't James Gunn. But I just hope we're not going all in one
tone.
One tone. We
And
need differences because otherwise, then the comic book genre feels tired, and I don't want it to feel tired. I want it to feel
absolutely.
new. I want it to feel fresh. I want to go into this optimistically. So that's just my only problem. But less studio interference where we're not seeing crap that happened in the past, like with Kevin Tsujihara and with Walter Hamada, I'm all for that. And I hope that they're going forward with, it seems like they're taking their time. So I'm going to try not to judge them so harshly because I did kind of bring the gavel down on them when they cut out Henry Cavill, but I'm still going to try to have some sort of optimism because I do love the DC characters so much, and I just want to see them get the movies and the universe they deserve, finally.
And you want a difference in tone. You don't want everything to have the same tone, which one could argue. I myself don't agree with this, but some people's criticisms of like Man of Steel was that it seemed like it was going for like a Nolan tone or too realistic or too dark of a tone. And although I don't agree with that,
I could see why
people could say, yeah, not everybody can have the same tone as Batman. Not everybody can have the same tone as Peacemaker.
Right.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because there was this report that James Gunn during Peacemaker, when the concept of having Aquaman in a quick scene, one of the ideas was actually having Aquaman fuck a fish, reportedly. Now, James Gunn wasn't able to obviously get that, and it sounds like that
what
was...
What are we going for,
now,
the deep?
It sounds like that was more of a joke than anything, that he was just trying to see how far he could go. And so I think it wasn't actually going to happen, but that was my very first thought. Was like, what is this, The Boys? Like, that would not work.
You know what that kind of reminds me of? You know when you ask your parents for like two things. You ask them for something really crazy like a pony, and then for something not as crazy like an iPod. But because the ask for the pony is so crazy, they go, you know what? The iPod isn't as crazy as I thought, and they get you the iPod anyway. I feel like James Gunn was like, okay, so he can't fuck a fish, but can he at least show up and they make
and
a
they
joke
talk
about it?
Right. So it would kind of, make sense, would connect some dots. And I do think like shows like Suicide Squad, the Peacemaker are so good because they're so different in tone than everything else. They're so much different than Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think, like you made a great point that a lot of these movies do feel the same. It's part of the reason why I miss 20th Century Fox so much and their X-Men movies. Because
they were different.
They were so much different.
They always had a message in each one.
Well, not in each one.
Okay. In the really good ones.
Let's be honest. As big of a fan as I am, half of those movies were iffy, half not. Half of them were great. But some of those movies, Warner Brothers and Disney would never have made. So, yeah, that's another reason. But what do you guys think about all of this? I know we've talked about a great deal of things, whether it's be studio interference, the setup for DC and DC Studios, James Gunn. Whatever you think, we'd love to hear your insight and your perspective on all of this. And that